Folks, welcome back to another episode of the Manana No Mas podcast. 2025 was an interesting year. We crept right past the 100 mark, and we've had some really great guests and episodes this year, and a lot of those were because of Noemi. So I want to introduce you to Noemi Beres. She is not from America, but we're going to go into more than that. She has a thing called Podcast Connections, which is where I've met some of our wonderful guests from this year. And with that, Noemi, I would love for you to just introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers and tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're up to.
Thank you so much for interviewing me today, Kurt. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so glad we connected through LinkedIn. So it's the power of LinkedIn. Yes, so my name is Noemi. I live in Cyprus, on the beautiful island, Mediterranean island of Cyprus in the past 14 years. I run a podcast booking agency called Podcast Connections, where I have entrepreneurs, business owners, coaches, authors, you name it, to get on quality podcast shows like yours, Kurt. And basically, I provide them with a done-for-you service. That's what I do in a nutshell. I love connecting. I love networking with people. I've been an entrepreneur since 2007. We had a different business before the pandemic. We had an online travel-related business. I was doing a lot of social media marketing, online marketing, content creation, travel writing, blogging, you name it, wearing too many hats. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the business collapsed and we had to pivot and we had to find a new one. And that was running a podcast booking agency. So that's basically my life. I have a master's degree in Scandinavian studies, which has nothing to do marketing, nothing to do sales, but I love learning languages. And I'm also an artist. I make mixed media collages and I do many other things as well in my life. So.
Well, it's the passions that keep us going from one thing to the next. You know, it's so interesting because when I started my entrepreneur's journey, there was someone that I was going to that was kind of mentoring me along a little bit. And Noemi, you might not be aware of this, but I am like the king of the verticals. I'm a public speaker. I'm a corporate trainer. I work in power sports. I work in the marine industry. I'm getting really big in the WordPress, digital agency space. And to me, they all marry together and make a common project. They all just work. But to the average person outside looking in, they're probably thinking, God, what the heck is he up to next? Because it just feels scattered to people that aren't in that space. But you're like a lifelong learner, and I'm sure that you're pulled by all kinds of passions.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have so many different things going on in my life. I have a podcast, which is which I only do solo episodes and reading my friends' books. It's an ASMR style reading podcast, which helps people to relax and sleep better, basically. I also have a project called Silent Thinking Sessions, where I provide people with a non-judgmental, very calm space to connect with their own thoughts again. So and I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. So we do so many different things, and it brings us joy. And I'm really passionate about every single one of them. So it's what I do. I try to lead everything from a heart-centered entrepreneurship, and I think that's really important to look after, to care for my clients and whomever I'm working with.
Yeah. Now, I'm probably going to skip off a couple of things because, I get distracted easy. But when I was young and I was not a person of means, I grew up a pretty meager childhood. I would watch public television and those travel shows. And all I wanted to do as I grew into a young adult was I wanted to travel. Like I wanted to go to Italy so bad. And then as I got older, I was like, it's never going to happen. I just like, it's not, you give up. I had a passport, but it was like, it's just not going to happen. Like I was supposed to go to Ecuador. Didn't happen. And then all of a sudden, I had written a book, the book got published, and then it sold more than I thought it was ever going to sell. And Ducati bought the book and I became an employee of Ducati. And immediately they were like, oh, they need you at the factory in Italy. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. But here, long story short, I fell in love with traveling to Europe. I've been multiple times now, and I'm amazed at how many people know multiple languages, how many people, travel. Like when I meet people from Switzerland that are business people, they typically know 6 languages.
Yeah,
When I
at
say,
least.
yeah, when I say know 6 languages, I mean they are completely fluent in 6 languages.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm in a mastermind group that meets every other Monday, and one of them is from the Netherlands, and he speaks multiple languages. Talk to me about like that. Like, so we have a lot of Western listeners, obviously, like mostly Americans. How does that happen? How do you adapt so many languages and be comfortable with the languages, and it's just a fact of life?
You need to do it. I was born and raised in Hungary in Central Europe, and I only, we only spoke Hungarian at home. So you need to learn languages at age 6, 7, 8, whatever age you are in, because nobody understands our language like ever on this whole entire planet. So I can talk to anyone in Hungarian next to you, like no one would understand me. So yeah, so I started with English, and I always had like kind of a passion and love for learning a new language. Even like I was, how old I was, like 6, 7, and I was listening to these, music on the radio because we listen to radio. And I used to make these mixtapes on the radio, and they were all like Eric Clapton or Stevie Wonders or whatever, the big great music, the great. And I tried to sing and just mimic the English language, because back then I couldn't speak English. And then I learned a lot by just singing songs and trying to do that. But I fell in love with traveling because of my parents. They traveled a lot in Europe, like in different countries. And I think the travel bug caught me early in my life. We went to different cities, different countries. It's so easy to drive from one European country to another. So for me, like we visited the ex Eastern Bloc countries like Bulgaria, the ex Yugoslavia. I went to like my biggest trip I had ever done with my grandparents to Venice, Italy. So I love Italy. I think it's such a beautiful place with, rich culture, history, food, everything. I always loved it. Then I became an exchange student when I was 16, and I spent a year in Denmark. I went to a Danish high school. I studied Danish. I lived with a Danish family. So that's how I basically went to university and learned Danish and became a linguist. But it just part of it, it was always part of my life. And I knew that if I want a job or if I want to do anything in my life, I need languages. So like at school, I learned German, French. In Denmark, I learned Latin. And then I started to learn Spanish, and now I learn Greek and Irish. So it's a lot of languages, but I love it. I'm a linguist. I'm a nerd. So
Yeah.
it's me. So.
Yeah. To me, it's just one of the coolest things. And I think it's a real sign of intelligence. When I was going back and forth to the factory in Italy, by my third trip, I had learned enough Italian to hold a conversation, and I took over Christmas presents and stuff for some of my coworkers. And I was like, "Bella figli grande," and I gave them the presents and stuff. And one of the ladies in the office who was about to retire, she goes, "Oh my gosh, you're speaking Italian." She says, "This is amazing." But it turned out that I was like the only American that went over from our company that went over and actually tried to like assimilate or learn their language or even go like hang out with them and have fun. Like
Yeah.
they would always expect the corporate, let's go out to the corporate dinner thing. And the corporate crony guys would go do that. But like I was going to people's grandmother's houses and getting recipes and stuff like that. It was so much
I love
fun.
that. Yeah.
So much fun. Yeah. So I think that's a really good bridge to, how I know you. Like we met on LinkedIn. Big shout out to LinkedIn. I meet a ton of people on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I meet with people on LinkedIn. That's the weird part. Like a lot of people collect connections and then never do anything with the connection. I'm like, hey, let's jump on a call. Let's get to know each other. And you're the same way. So we jumped on, we got to know each other. That was great. Talk to me about this podcast Connections. Like I met you and then you introduced me to, is it 5? Did we do 5 people already?
Yeah, almost.
I think Vanessa's 5.
Yeah, Vanessa's 5. Yeah. And then me, like.
Nah, you don't count. So Talk to me about like where did that come from? So there's people in the States that try to do this, podcast wrangling thing.
Yeah.
And here you are halfway around the globe, and you and I have made a connection and exchanged people for the show, right? So it's like, obviously remote work's not a problem. Obviously time isn't a problem. It's nighttime where you're at, right? So it's like,
It's like almost 6, but that's not, that's like, I'm just starting to work.
yeah. So dinner for you is like in 2 or 3 hours, right? You eat late.
Sometimes I have earlier dinner than I can do the rest of it.
There you go. There you go. Well, tell us about how this started to come together and why it's doing what it's doing for you.
Yes, it's so funny because like for so many entrepreneurs, when you have to pivot, and what we did in 2020, we needed to do that because the whole travel industry just collapsed from one day to another. And to be honest with you, Kurt, I had no clue about the podcasting world at all back in 2020. So like most people, it's like, oh, you shouldn't say that on a podcast, but like that's the truth. I mean, I was in a different niche, different industry, and luckily we had a mentor, an Irish guy, who started basically a course for how to start a podcast booking agency, and then everybody's going to earn a lot of money and everybody's going to be successful. And I don't know how many people started with him, like loads and loads of them. But I think like 2 podcast booking agencies we survived, and everybody thought it's just easy peasy, but it's not. Obviously, you have to work a lot in different time zones and odd hours and so on. And for me, it was a huge difference because I always worked in the background in our previous business. But this one, I'm kind of in the spotlight. I'm the face of the company. I'm doing all these podcast interviews, and I enjoy it so much. And I never even knew about that. Like, I would love this kind of getting to know people, networking with people. And as you said, LinkedIn plays such an important part for me. And that's how I basically built my connections and met so many amazing hosts and clients. And when people tell me, it's like, oh, LinkedIn doesn't work, it's just blah, 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 this and that. It's like, it's not true. If you do it right, you can have so many important, meaningful connections. You just need to work on it. You just have to put yourself out there. So that's how it all started. That's how we started to get the first clients. And it was always LinkedIn, like getting to reach out to them on LinkedIn, even if it was a cold reach out. But I always did my, research about obviously potential clients and everything. And it helps so much for basically running the whole podcast booking agency and up till now. And I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but it works for me. It makes business. And
Yeah.
I know you are big into LinkedIn as well. I saw your LinkedIn post. I follow you and everything. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's a brilliant platform to do that.
Well, a year into the pandemic, I only had 1,200 connections on LinkedIn. And I thought, well, this will be the one that I embrace. Like, I was not a fan of Facebook. I was not a fan of Twitter at the time. And I thought at the time, I was like, LinkedIn seems to be the most positive social network that I can find. And so I embraced it, and I came up and I really studied it, Noemi. And then I ended up making a course because I got up to 10,000 connections. And out of those 10,000 connections, I don't spam people. And so I was like, how do you grow your LinkedIn without spamming people? And that became like our course theme on how we do that. And to me, it's very organic. There might be some tools or some things that you incorporate to make the initial contact or connection. But I think the success of it really depends on that organic touch. And it's that way with podcasting. I'm not going to have, some digital avatar take my place in an interview. I'm going to be a person that's going to do the podcast. And I think it's really important that it's organic and that the conversations are natural.
Absolutely, 100%. I think nothing will replace human connection. Like I'm a big fan of AI. I use, for many things, but human connection, human touch, so important.
So you have kind of like this list of topics, and a couple of the topics really jump off to me, and it's through my experience in podcasting. So when I started podcasting, Noemi, I had no idea that this was going to do what it does. I used to live in California, and the commute was long, not long in distance, long in time because of traffic. And finally I said, you know what, I'll just download some podcast app and I'll just talk at the phone for 45 minutes while I'm going to work. And I started making these solo episodes. I had no idea anyone was going to listen. And then I started interviewing guests, and then it just grew. And now here we are. It's like, I don't know, I've been doing this like 7 years or 8 years or something like that. Um, Things blow my mind. So somebody wants to be my guest. They come to my show. We record, I edit, I distribute. I think you've noticed I'm a little tenacious about distribution. Like, I don't just put it out once. I repost the.
You do a lot of reposts. Like I've seen my clients just popping up in my feed. I don't know how many times. So I'm thinking you're doing a brilliant job in that for sure.
So I try to keep the work alive. Like, as best I can, I try to keep the work alive. Do you have any reasoning why guests don't do it?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'm trying to teach my clients to do that. And, like sometimes with luck, sometimes with no luck. But I just don't get it, because podcast guesting is one of the best marketing strategies in 2025 and in the past years. And obviously, there are other marketing strategies as well, but this is so effective. You're creating evergreen content. You can repurpose this content. You can post it 100 times on different social media channels, because no one will remember what did you post like 2 days ago or a week ago or a month ago. And I just don't get it why people don't use it. Like, it's so much content. Content is still king. And everybody complains about oh, I don't know how to create content. I don't know what to do, how to do it. Like, come on. Podcast interviews, cut them up. There are loads and loads of videos, audio clips, anything. You can use it basically forever. And I don't understand it either. So when I meet people, I'm trying to educate them. And that's actually my plan for 2026, to help them to know more about it and to help them with how to use social media when you are a podcast guest, because it's so important. Because it's not enough just post it once. You can do it as many times as you want. And it's so powerful.
So many people don't understand in the social space that when you post something, only a certain percentage of your connections will actually see that single post. And so you're not spamming your audience to repost the same content. You're giving the opportunity for people to actually see it the first time.
Exactly. That's it. I mean, that's so true. I mean, nobody, I like a very low percentage. And especially that we are in different time zones. Like, you can even post it in the morning or in the evening, and different people will see it. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah. Well, big shout out to Deb Cryer, one of your people. She's reposted a couple of times. So she's in the game.
Great. She's great.
Doing it. And you had mentioned cutting it up, like, especially in the world of AI, like even if you just went with Opus AI clips.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know that they could take whatever YouTube video link and cut it into snippets, automatically, and then distribute it. I think a lot of podcast guests think that they don't own the link or they don't own the video, so they can't edit or cut things up. I think that they're worried about doing that. And I don't think a lot of guests realize that they're actually expected to.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why I also find it useful to have a post-interview conversation with the host, between the host and the guest. And the guest can initiate that. And sometimes even my clients, they reach back to me. It's like, oh, can you ask this or that from the host? It's like, and I almost tell them, you can ask them after the interview. That's how you build a relationship. That's how you network. It doesn't have to go through me. I mean, you can have joint kind of business adventures together. You can become friends, anything. So you're jumping on like a 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes call after a podcast interview, maybe a few days later. There's so many opportunities you can discover together. And I think that's a brilliant opportunity to do that. And then you can ask the host, okay, can I use it? Can I use your YouTube link, or can I cut it up, or can I do whatever? And I do have those clients finally now that even I ask the host, can we do that? Because they are very eager to share the content. It's like, I don't think a host would say no to that, because why? It's a win-win situation for everyone. If you tag the host, you just exchange audience, basically exchange followers on LinkedIn, and everybody is happy.
Yeah. And so on our end, we do, we have an email that goes out to our email list that talks about our latest episodes. We put it up on our website. Our website does a blog post article about the podcast, and then it has the podcast, and then we have audio on podcast channels, and then we have video on YouTube and other video channels. We do our best to try and spread it out, but podcasting is also very strange in this way, Noemi. And tell me if you hear this from other people. It is dang near impossible for me to know who is actually listening or watching my podcast.
Yes. I so many people ask me this question. So download numbers, people, who's listening? And like, you
Yeah.
don't really know that. Like, we always check listen notes, listennotes.com, and you can see the social following. You can see, which percentage you are in as a podcast host, but basically that's it. Like, if you don't have like millions of downloads or whatever, I don't think you have that kind of information. So it's hard to say. And people ask me about ROI and everything. It's like, yeah, and this is a different marketing strategy. This is not Instagram ad. This is not Facebook ad where you can have data, where you can download everything. This is a bit different, but you have a very like a big reach and big audience, whatever you do with podcast guesting. But there's no like backup data basically to prove that.
The reach for me is actually better than the numbers indicate. That's the confusing part, Noemi, is a couple of years ago, and I've told you this offline, and I'll say it during the show, I almost canceled the show. I was just going to turn it off. I mean, I thought nobody was listening. And then I was on a sales call in Texas. I was near Waco, Texas. I can't remember the name of the town. It doesn't matter what name of the town was. I was doing a sales call. The company I was doing it for said, we're going to send you to this dealership, but they're hard-nosed. They're not going to buy anything. We just need you to show up, And I was like, well, that's a heck of a pep talk. And so I went in and I knew the general manager. And so I talked to him, blah, 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 blah. And I'm in his office and the owner called in and we put him on speakerphone. And the guy said, is the guy from XYZ there? And yeah, he's in the office. Kurt's here. And he goes, Kurt who? And he says, Kurt Von Annen. And the owner of the dealership goes, Kurt Von Annen, the Manana No Mas guy is there? And that's the first time, Noemi, I had ever heard that. Like, I've been described as the Manana No Mas guy. I was like, that was weird. And I tried not to look surprised. And then the guy says, I've been listening to him for 3 years. Whatever he says to do, just say yes and I'll write the check.
Oh, I love that. See, this is the power of podcasting. Like, that's it.
And then I went to a word camp for my very first word camp because I'm in the, digital agency space.
Yeah.
So I went to word camp for the very first time in San Diego. I'm walking away from the event and someone starts screaming my name. And I'm like, who is that? I turn around and I'm with friends, so I turn around and it's these two older ladies sitting at a table at a bar screaming my name. And I walk out, I go, how do you know me? She goes, you're the Manana No Mas guy. I listen to you all the time. And I was like, okay, something's up because no comments, no likes, no shares, no, like I'm getting nothing from this podcast, but now I'm running into people in the wild that listen to it. And so I'm like, I can't quit. I have to keep it going.
That was a sign. That was the sign you were getting that like you must keep doing what you're doing because you're doing it well and people listen. Even if they don't give you feedback or if they don't leave a review, which is also important, like just to mention that, during this interview that like, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on different platforms because it matters. It matters.
Yeah. So, we're on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, all the normal channels. Yeah. But on YouTube, for example, my channel has 102 subscribers, and that's years and years and hundreds of videos. And then you say, well, how does that happen? But then it's like, sometimes people listen and they never subscribe, they never like, or they see it because the video might be embedded in another site. And so they don't really go back to the YouTube to subscribe. It's a very strange environment.
Yes, it is indeed. What I realized and noticed that so many podcasters ask their, potential guests when they apply and they submit different podcast, guesting forms to fill out the form and leave a review and subscribe to YouTube and everything. And sometimes they even double check it, which is good because, I mean, come on. I mean, podcast host, you put so much energy, money, time, effort into just creating one single episode. So this is the least people can do. I mean, it's just a click to subscribe. It takes a minute or two to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. So why not to do that? Why not, just show some kindness to each other? That I think is so important in life.
It is. It is. So you had a couple of other things on there, like etiquette and being on time and things like that. And that's super, super, super important. But I have one for you, and that is when people are looking to be on a podcast, they want to be the guest. The idea is they want to be the guest to promote something, a business, a book, a new program, something. Why do I get the feeling that most guests come and they're not ready to promote their thing?
Yeah, probably they're not ready to. And that's a great question, Kurt. Yes, because I don't. The interesting thing is that not many people know their product so well or service so well, or they're not so focused on it. I don't know why. I mean, I think it's really important to not wing your podcast interviews. So you have to be 100% sure, what do you want to talk about? What kind of topics? What's your product? What's your call to action? Like, go through it, like each step, practice it. And obviously your first podcast interview was wouldn't be your best one, but with practice, everything is going to be so much better. And try to just, practice everything and get ready for every single interview. Listen to those interviews. I listened to your interview with one of my clients you did, and I enjoyed it so much. And I just felt, okay, so that's how you ask questions. That's the kind of vibe you have. I think it's so important to get ready, get prepared for every single interview. And then you can talk about anything, basically, about your product, about your service. And I also wanted to emphasize, like, don't treat the podcast interview as just a promotional space. Yeah. Because I heard these horror stories that people got on podcasts, thankfully not my client, but they were just like, somebody asked them a question, the host asked them a question, and they said, you can find it in my book on page 22. Like, this is not what podcast guesting about. You always need to provide value, and you always need to add value to the show. Otherwise, there's no point doing podcast interviews or podcast guesting, because it's only be a commercial, and who needs one more commercial? Like,
yeah. Hey, speaking of commercials, if someone wanted to be on podcasts and use you, how would they? Like, let's say someone's listening to this right now, and then they think, I'd always wanted to do it, but I just don't know how to get started. Or I always wanted, but I don't know if I would qualify, right? That's people like, that imposter syndrome, right? I'm never good enough. How do people find out if they're good enough? They get in touch with you.
Yes, please do that. Get in touch with me, and we're going to find it out. But I think it's everybody capable to do that, to be honest. Like, so they can get in touch with me on my website, which is podcastconnections.co, in plural and CO. And you can always find me on LinkedIn, Noemi Beres, and I'm there. And yes, and I think everybody is capable to do that. You just need to practice it. You just need to learn it, and start with small. So don't shoot for the big podcast. Just try the easier ones.
Yeah, so that's a great point. How do you guide people to know, like, well, what's an easier podcast? Like, how do you identify an easy podcast versus one that's more challenging?
That's a great question. For me, is definitely maybe a smaller podcast with not like a huge number of listeners, and we can aim those, like, the smaller, medium-sized podcasts, because it's just better for everyone. Hard to say. It's really hard because we started to work in e-commerce first, and e-commerce podcasts used to be smaller, very niche. They had maybe fewer, like lesser listeners, but whatever. But it doesn't matter, because those are the niche podcasts. So it's really hard to decide which is the smaller. Obviously, you can see the numbers, the reviews, and everything on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, the subscribers. And first of all, you need to listen. If you are aligned with that kind of message and that kind of podcast or episode that you're listening with, you can go ahead with it. Try to see the numbers too. Like, if there's somebody has, let's say, 20 to 50 episodes. And that's okay to start with them. Why not? It can be a really big podcast in a year or two. You don't know that. Just and listen, like get to know the host, get to know the show, and then you can decide, even if you don't hire me, because not everybody can hire everyone, but just do your research and listen to those podcasts.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And let's be transparent about how you and I have communicated, right? Because I think this might help people that are trying to get started. Like you send me an email that says, "Hey, have you checked out so-and-so? This is like their website. This is a book they published. This is a link to a talk they gave. Let me know if you think this would be a good fit for your show," right? Like you give me some background, you give me some links that I can go to. And so whether you have a Noemi in your back pocket or not, when you introduce yourself to people and you're looking to be on their show, you should be able to say, well, this is what I've done before, and this is what I would like. This is the energy, or this is the information I would like to bring to your show.
Absolutely. Like it's not so complicated. I mean, obviously you introduce yourself. You have a short bio. Don't write a novel because nobody has time to read that. Short and sweet. Like the most important thing about mention your topics, what kind of topics you want to talk about, how these topics can add value to the show. Important. And also include your social links, your website. And if you did any other podcast guesting before, please include that. Maybe just a snippet, just a short video in the email, so you can show the host like what kind of experience you got. And that's it. I mean, you don't need much.
Yeah. And I want to touch on something else. You're like, oh my gosh, he's making a podcast theme show right now. People panic about the equipment. You don't need to panic about the equipment. I have interviewed people on their phones. I've interviewed people on a tablet somewhere. There's audio editing software right now where I could take almost all the background noises out. And so I literally have a video I made on my training website for teaching people how to be an agency. There's a lawnmower in the yard next door to me and it's running. And I made the video because I was like, I'm just going to make it. And if I have to remake it, I have to remake it. But I'm here now. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And I said it. And then I ran it through the software and you can't hear the mower at all.
That's it. The power of the technology. I mean, when we have our first strategy call with our clients, we always tell them it's like, maybe it's a good idea to invest in a good mic, because the built-in mics in laptop or a computer maybe not the best ones. So try to invest in a good mic. But like, come on, like for $20, $50, you can buy a good one. Like you don't need the Blue Jetty or whatever. Like you don't need to go over the top. A camera, most of the laptops, they have good cameras right now. So you can totally use that. And the lighting is, of course, it's important. So if it's daylight, try to use the sun and everything for your advantage. And the ring light is important. So for example, I always have it, but you don't need much. And earbuds maybe because of the echo and so on.
Yeah.
But basically that's it. And you can even start a podcast like that, or you can be a podcast guest like that. Obviously, if you are really nerdy and if you want to go into quality and you have the money for that, yes, you can go over the top, but you don't need a big investment to start anything basically, or to be a podcast guest.
Yeah, like we're going to be making some changes here to the office in the very near future. We're going to change the color of the wall and the bookshelf is going to change and all that kind of stuff. But that's stuff that comes over time. I mean, that evolves over a great space.
Yeah.
I think the number one thing is to just get started. And if you're not confident in getting started on your own, connect with someone like Noemi so that you have someone in your corner.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the shout out, Kurt.
No, it's huge because there's it's really difficult to say that there is a drought of talent, but because there's always something out there to interview or talk to or whatever. But people think that they don't have enough to share sometimes. Sometimes they think what they have to say isn't important, but there's always somebody that's going to get value from what you share.
Yes.
It's such a weird thing. I used to be a youth pastor when I was younger, and sometimes I would talk to the kids and I would walk away and think that was the worst talk I ever gave. There was no value in that at all. I didn't save any of those kids. They're all going to Hades. Like you would just beat yourself up. And then like a year, 2 years later, some kid will come up and be like, and now they're like, now I've got former kids that are grown. They have kids of their own now. You know, they've gotten married and everything.
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh, that talk that you gave, blah, 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 changed my life." And I'm like, that was the worst talk I ever gave.
But exactly, but you don't know. Like maybe just one person you can help with a podcast interview or with a talk. It's so powerful.
Yeah,
It's so important.
that is so good. Well, Noemi, I really want to thank you for coming on. I mean, you've been gracious enough to send all your guests to me, but it's great to have you on the show too. I want to value your time. Like, first off, thanks for coming, right? I don't want to take your whole day away from you, but how can listeners and viewers get a hold of you? Like, if they want to say, man, I'm going to throw caution to the wind and just get a hold of this lady, how would you prefer that?
Best way, website, podcastconnections.co website. Please visit our website and you can get in touch with us. Or LinkedIn, MySpace. So please just type my name in, Noemi Beres, and I'm happy to chat.
That is perfect. Folks, this is Noemi. She's a wealth of information about podcasting. And if you want to learn anything about Danish literature, you could probably connect with her and learn about that as well. Folks, this has been great. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next episode.